Today I'm going to answer the question that many of you ask me over and over and over again on a regular basis. It is, how do I stop losing with pocket jacks? It's frustrating. I know. So many people complain that they hate the pocket jacks. But here's a little secret for you. Pocket jacks is actually one of the most profitable hands in poker if you play it well. You just have to limit the big mistakes that most people make with them. And they make a few very big mistakes. And in this video, I'm going to give you 2 very important strategies to help you maximize your profit with pocket jacks and, more importantly, help you limit your big losses. So, tip number 1 is to stop overplaying pocket jacks before the flop. Pocket jacks should actually do a lot of calling when someone re-raises you before the flop, especially when you are deep stacked and when you are in position. Let's take a look at these 2 charts. Here we are playing 100 big blinds deep in a cash game, okay? Standard cash game, standard rake. You raise the button, the small blind 3-bets you. So let's say you're playing 1-2 no limit hold'em, $200 deep. You raise it up on the button to, let's say, $6, maybe $8. The small blind 3-bets you to about 3.5 or 4 times that. So you make it 6, they make it, let's say, 24. This is a spot where most small stakes players re-raise. They put in $70, and then if they get shoved on, they call it off. But take a look at this. Pocket jacks calls the 3-bet most of the time. And I would venture to say that if your opponents are not 3-betting often enough in the small blind, as most people will not, you should actually call with them every time. Notice the decently wide calling range. Having hands like jacks in that range helps protect that range a little bit, but also you just don't want to get all the money in against a 5-betting range. The desire to not see an overcard on the flop causes many players to make blunders with their pocket jacks and instead get all of their money in decently bad. You have to realize that when you pile all of your money in before the flop with jacks, against people who are playing anywhere near reasonably, they're usually going to show you aces, kings, queens, or ace-king. And it turns out jacks actually does not do well against that range. You have to accept the additional variance you will have where you're going to call the 3-bet, get a bad flop, and then lose. That is okay. Let's take a look at a scenario where you're just facing an initial raise. Let's say under the gun +1 raises in a 8-handed tournament. So let's say you're in the cutoff. The second player to act raises. Take a look at this 3-betting range, the hands in red. Realize that jacks doesn't even re-raise before the flop a lot of the time. And notice 10s and 9s definitely don't. They just call and see the flop. All of these hands in green flop reasonably well and want to see the flop, including the pocket jacks. And again, if you think the under the gun +1 player is primarily raising with just a decently strong range to begin with, perhaps a little bit tighter than the game theory optimal range, you in turn should not re-raise your jacks. Now, if you do re-raise your jacks here and they shove it all in, you can't really fold. But you have to realize that is a really, really, really bad spot for you, and you would rather not do that in a tournament, especially if you're anywhere near getting in the money. So instead, call, see the flop, and then realize sometimes things are not going to go well for you after the flop, and that's going to be okay. But keeping the jacks in your range, a hand that will make an overpair a decent amount of the time, or at least a strong underpair, is very, very good for you. So stop overplaying the jacks pre-flop. I'm telling you, so many people, they 3-bet, 4-bet, 5-bet, whatever. They're trying to get their money in with jacks because they don't want to get outdrawn, and that is a big mistake. Because, yeah, you're not going to get outdrawn by the worst hands, but when you're beat, you get your money in very, very poorly. So, you know to not overplay the hands pre-flop. Well, you should also stop overplaying your hands made with pocket jacks post-flop. Let's take a look at 2 examples where players drastically overplay their jacks. Here we have a very common scenario, playing 1-3 no limit. You raise it up to $10. Button calls, big blind calls, flop comes 9, 7, 5. We have the pocket jacks. This is actually a spot where I think checking is the default play. Whenever you raise and there's somebody yet to act in a multi-way pot on a low card board, you should very often check with your entire range. I know that may seem incredibly weak or passive, but you very often should be checking in the spot. Now, I will say, I don't mind betting, especially if your opponents are going to play very straightforwardly, as they very often will do in small and medium stakes games. So against good, strong, world-class players, I think you need to check here. But against more straightforward players, betting could be fine. We bet 15, button calls, big blind raises to 45. Oh, an annoying spot, right? This is exactly what you don't want to see, because in this scenario, now you're beating your opponent's draws, but you're losing to all logical value hands. Now, to be fair, you may think, well, I beat ace-9 and king-9 and queen-9 and jack-9 and 10-9. Yeah, but if your opponent's playing those hands by check raising the flop, they're probably really bad at poker. So if your opponent's going to drastically overvalue top pair on this very coordinated board, where you have to remember, you could easily have aces, kings, queens, jacks, all the sets. If they're going to overplay their hands, then you can't go around folding the jacks. But this is a spot where if anyone's good, they're going to just call with those hands and keep the pot manageable. Also, some players will not bluff with some logical bluffs in this scenario, like various gut shot straight draws. When your opponent check raises in this spot, they should be very polarized. Either very good made hands they're happy to get it all in with, or draws. Some of them high equity draws, some of them junky draws. So what should we do with these jacks here? I think it's a very clear, non-all-in hand. And in this spot, we should either call or we should fold. What a lot of people do, though, is they just rip it all in. You want to know why? Because they don't want to get outdrawn. And whenever you do jam here, if your opponent is sitting here with a hand like ace-8 or king-8 or queen-8, they're going to fold, sure. But whenever they have you crushed, they're always going to call and you're going to get your money in poorly. Would I have folded to the flop check raise? It's definitely a tough spot because you don't necessarily know what turn cards are bad for you, and the player on the button could have been slow playing, which would be really bad. But I think calling the smallish check raise is at least justifiable. However, playing in a generic 1-3 game at the win, I don't mind folding. Especially if you know your opponent is not going to use this size with a bluff all that often. And I will say, when people use small check raises, as this one is pretty small in this spot, it's usually going to be very tilted towards hands they don't mind giving you good odds with, which are usually going to be the nuts. So anyway, this is probably a call or fold, but definitely not an all-in, because when you do get called, you're going to be dead or close to dead. We do get called. Oh, we have 0%. Not zero. Zero means almost zero. And not shocking. You're going to be shown in this scenario a set, two pair, or a straight basically every time you shove and get called. Let's take a look at a spot from a tournament. We raise it up with the jacks. Big blind calls. Queen 10-2. Opponent checks. I think you can bet or check. Either play is reasonable. We go for a small bet. Sure. Opponent calls. Turns to 7. Opponent checks. Tricky spot. We have the best hand a lot of the time if almost no more money goes into the pot. If you've studied at pokercoaching.com in my tournament or cash game masterclass, you know this is a very clear marginal made hand. If we bet this turn, yeah, maybe we can get some value from a 10, but a queen is literally never folding. And we may get check raised some portion of the time in this spot because we have almost no two pairs or newly made two pairs in our range when we get to the turn, whereas the opponent could very easily have queen 7 suited or 10-7 suited, maybe even 10-7 offsuit, maybe even queen 7 offsuit. So this is a spot where we're going to want to check our marginal made hands, and this is very clearly a marginal made hand. However, in this spot, our hero, Alan apparently, bet 3,000, and I think this is a pretty clear mistake. He gets raised, and this is where it's a pretty brutal spot because your opponent's range is going to be very polarized again. What's a polarized range look like here? It's going to be two pair and better, maybe like king, queen and better. And then it's going to be some draws, some high equity draws, some low equity draws. Low equity draws may be stuff like Jack 8. That'd be a pretty spicy low equity bluff if they check call the flop. But notice we actually block some of the Jack 8s, so that's a little bit unlikely. Maybe some bad flush draws, maybe. That's about it. And then some very high equity draws like King Jack of Hearts or Ace Jack of Hearts that's happy enough getting all the money in. So this is a spot where we definitely should not have bet the turn. Once we bet the turn and get raised, it's just a fold. It's annoying, but it's probably a fold because we're going to play quite poorly on the river. We call, river's a 9. Jack 8 gets there. Opponent bets 15K. Interesting spot. So we beat the logical value bet with king jack that comes in, and we block that very hard. However, it's just still so likely the opponent's sitting here with 2 pair or better, right? So I think this is a spot in a random $500 tournament, presuming a live $500 tournament, where you just have to make a very, very easy fold. In a high stakes tournament, maybe you can justify finding a call, but again, that's kind of dicey because even though we do block the logical king jack value bet, we also block some of the random jacks that may decide to check raise the turn. And a lot of those that came in either were jack 8 that just made the nuts or jack 9 that may not even bluff the river or make some weird value bet on the river. So this is just a fold. This is a fold. Allen calls. Queen 7 offsuit. Not shocking. But the big mistake here was continuing to bet on the turn. So you have to make sure you do not overplay your pocket jacks, both pre-flop and post-flop. You have to realize, if you are losing with pocket jacks pre-flop, especially if you look at your database and see that you're losing with one of the best hands in the game, it means you're putting in way too much money poorly. And by the way, these tips also apply to hands like pocket 10s and pocket 9s. Also, you have to make sure you stop overplaying pocket jacks post-flop. Same story. Pocket jacks are very often a marginal made hand. They're good if some or medium amount of money goes in the pot. They are not good if all the money goes in the pot. That's all there is to it. Enjoy all of the extra winnings. Stop overplaying the jacks and make sure you protect yourself before you wreck yourself. That's going to be it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope we've taken a hand that you're not winning enough money with, pocket jacks, and elevated it to one of the most profitable hands in your strategy. Good luck in your games. Have fun. Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this video, very quickly hit the like and subscribe button down below. Takes you 1 second. Go ahead. I'll wait for you. All right, good. Have a great day. Good luck with the jacks.